First of all, let me clarify. I don't hate Americans, at least not all of you, and almost certainly not anyone likely to watch this video. George, Dick and Donald are of course exceptions to this caveat. I really do hate those fuckers. The truth is, I simply chose a provocative title which would resonate with many Americans. The last 7 or so years have been tough on the American collective psyche, and even the most determinedly dim-witted among you, the 20% or so still rooting for Bush, realize that you are no longer universally loved. But most of you are sensible enough to know that this was never really the case. Alas, quite a number of you have opted to replace one absurd illusion with another, specifically that vast numbers of people now hate you for no reason. Let me reassure you that this is not the case. Those that hate you have very good reasons indeed. So what is the root of this reversal? Let me have a shot at clarifying it. Those of us that think about America, have a grasp of her history and some sense of the context in which this history has played out, have a great love for the idea that America represents. I consider myself such a person. I remember discovering the Federalist papers about a decade ago. They were a joy to read, and I frequently skim over my favorite bits. Link to the right for those of you who haven't read them. Shame on you if you're an American. The American Constitution is a masterpiece that has for several hundred years withstood the determined efforts of fascists, demagogues, and the blatantly criminal to dismantle it. Not that I subscribe to any coherent conspiracy, I merely note that some people are interested only in their own short-term gain, that they consider everything else subordinate to the demands of their hindbrain, and that unhappily such driven and egotistical individuals frequently attain positions of significant power. The framers of your Constitution were all too aware of this propensity of human nature, and they took steps to mitigate these risks. With my bona fides as an Amerophile briefly established, let me explain what pisses me off currently, and why I think my state of mind is probably generally applicable. Now, it can't have failed to escape your notice that Americans are getting a lot of harsh commentary about Iraq, and after 5 years of red-faced, spittle-flecked yelling, this criticism does appear to be getting through. And that is part of the problem right there. You see, nearly 2 million people demonstrated in London on the eve of the war, and they were ignored. And happily, the tone of the conversation has been going downhill since then. The problem, it seems to me, is that Americans don't see themselves as part of the global community in the same sense that many of the rest of us do. Community implies communication, the peaceful exchange of ideas which can result in new policies, changes in direction, or respectful and reasoned disagreement. This, of course, as we now know to our cost, did not happen. Instead, millions of voices around the world, and some at home, making a compelling case against the war, were ignored. This was both disrespectful and a breach of the gentleman's agreement forged after the last World War. I call it a gentleman's agreement. I call it a gentleman's agreement because the structures of the United Nations were so flawed from the outset and so frequently undermined by the more powerful nation-states that one cannot speak of a genuine body of formal law or a genuine legislative body in any meaningful sense. So you see, much of the anger, vitriol and occasional hatred, at least from fellow Democrats, is really a result of surprise, disappointment, and a sense of injustice. We expected more from the shining city on a hill. We expected to be heard, to be respected, and given the overwhelming and clearly reasoned resistance to the war, now vindicated, we naively perhaps expected you to agree. Well, now you do agree. Or at least most of you do, so better late than never. But although we have learned a lot from the last 7 years or so, we still have a problem. We live in an increasingly interdependent world. We face some fairly stiff challenges, potentially insurmountable, without your skills, your optimism and your cooperation in the mix. Yet you need us just as much as we need you. We depend on each other. We have become a genuine global community. So here is the problem. How do we decide stuff? By screaming at each other? By war? Not simple local stuff, but the really big questions. Mitigating global warming, preventing war, and educating the hundreds of millions of our illiterate fellow citizens that remain ignorant and impoverished. Now, we're all Democrats here, or mostly anyway, on YouTube. We at least pay lip service to the idea of collective decision-making. We accept this in our cities, our regions, and our nation-states. We even increasingly accept it in vast supernatural regions like the EU, India, and the US itself. So why the curious resistance then to collective decision making at a global level? The last 7 years have shown us all that we can't simply go it alone on issues that affect everyone else. Everyone has a contribution to make, and we need improved mechanisms to convert those contributions to binding decisions. The alternative is at best more yelling, and no one really wants that. Peace.